Hi, Cass. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Lauren. Nice to see you.
So, tell the listeners who you are and a little bit more about your work, which is super interesting and unique.
I'm Cas Holman, and I design for play, which means that I design everything from toys to playgrounds to play spaces to occasionally curriculum or workshops with adults. So, kind of designing for the possibility and the kind of conditions for play to arise.
That's so interesting. How did you get into that?
Well, let's see where to begin.
Yeah, I'm sure it's
I
not a
mean, the
linear
short,
path.
no, no, very non-linear. I mean, and I think it was a playful path. I, since I was a kid, was really stressed out by the idea that we had to like decide what we wanted to be when we grew up, right? That question would just like keep me up at night. Like, I have to decide, and then you have to do just that one thing. And all of the things that I saw around me didn't necessarily appeal. Even though I think I was just kind of an enthusiast in general. I liked doing so many things and loved a good adventure. So basically, like I kind of had a number of different jobs over the years, everything from research assistant in the Galapagos Islands to pastry chef to I worked for a high-end furniture dealer, and ultimately kind of found my way to design as a place where I could kind of have a positive impact on my community and the world around me, and also use my creativity and make things because I was always making things and really needed to continue being creative.
Mhm. That's super
So,
cool.
yeah, found my way to design. And then once I went back to school, actually, when I was 28, to kind of, get some skills and kind of delve into like what's going on in design, like what's going on over here? What are
Yeah.
you guys doing? Right? Um, the first thing that I designed was wound up being a toy. And I realized like, oh yeah, this seems actually really meaningful and kind of important, like giving people tools to play with that, spark their creativity, but in a way that they get to decide what the story is. They get to make up the story. Um, and and pretty quickly, as I looked around at toys and things designed for play, specifically for children, I kind of saw that in a lot of most of the products that were available, they kind of like already had the story built in. So children were able to play out somebody else's story or kind of do what the designer designed it to do. But there wasn't a lot of room for the children to kind of design the story, imagine the thing themselves, and kind of like figure it out and invent it on their own. So that was where I really like realized like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to figure out a way that we can like kind of help kids get the tools to make up their own stories and really design the play themselves.
That's really cool. I have two young kids, so I resonate to like the pretend play and like the wild stuff that they come up with all on their
Yeah.
own. And you wonder where they thought of this. So before we get into the big ideas, I just want to start a little lighter. What's the last playful thing that you did just for fun, completely outside of work, even though I guess your work is a little bit
Yeah.
playful?
I know it's fine line. Um, well, I would actually describe just the way I made breakfast this morning was actually quite playful. Um, we There's some stuff in the fridge that was about to spoil, and I didn't have my usual, my go-to, which is like a egg and a toast, or toast and an egg. So I kind of took a bunch of stuff out of the fridge that was about to go bad and started putting it together, and kind of, with curiosity about how will it go. So there was this kind of like I embraced the possibility of what on earth might come of this combination of the food. And I also kind of reframed success in terms of that success isn't that I have this, a beautiful masterpiece of a breakfast. Success is that like I get some food in my body and I use up this stuff that's gonna go bad, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's actually one of my kind of three tenets that I think will help adults be more playful. is that reframing success. Like, what am I after? Do I need to have a beautiful meal, or can I just kind of dive in and feel glad that I've not wasted food and eaten?
Yeah. Well, actually, this is a good segue because one of the things you read about in your book is that adults don't need a playground, they need a mindset shift. So, why is the
Mhm.
mindset shift the real barrier to play, maybe not environment or tools? And maybe that leads into sort of what you were saying, like there's three things people need.
Yeah. It's interesting. Over the course of my career, people have asked me, what about adults? And for a long time, I was hesitant to kind of um, uh, even speculate. In part because I kind of knew like it's not about designing for adults really. It's about like adults letting ourselves play, right? Like yes, of course, like I would love to design an adult playground and also I could design the most incredible thing and if adults like aren't letting themselves play, my playground isn't going to work, right?
Right.
And I design for who people are, right? And so it was kind of like, well, like we're not quite there yet, right? Like until we let ourselves play, until we release judgment, which is a big one of the three tenets. So um, releasing judgment is kind of trusting yourself and the people around you. And the second thing is embracing possibilities. So being able to kind of see the possibility of what's there and kind of not being attached to what we expect or what
Yeah.
we imagined to be the way things were going to happen, right? So there's a little bit of like comfort with uncertainty in embracing possibility. And then the third thing is reframing success. So ask yourself what you're really after. Like, if you're going for a hike and the trail is rained out, like maybe you play in the brook for a while, right? Or maybe you like start to like make some mud castles, or hang out with the moss and watch some birds, right? So, but if we get so hung up on like this is what I set out to do and now it's not going to work and so everything is ruined, then like that we're not going to like do well. Like we're not going to be very agile, right?
Yeah.
So by reframing success, we can kind of, and again, embracing the possibilities of what comes up, but also kind of say like, oh wait, I'm, I don't need to like hike to the top of the mountain in order to have, relaxed, been in nature, like had some fresh air, chatted with my friend or the child that's with me.
Yeah.
And like, what was my goal again? My goal was to connect with this person or get out of the city. So I don't have to get to the top of the mountain in order to do that. Like maybe I'm going to hang out with this brook and play with some rocks instead.
Yeah.
So
I feel like there's so many ways to take what you just said and put it back into your career, right? Like releasing the expectations of like, I went to school to be a lawyer, now being a lawyer is the only path for me. Or
right.
having that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset, I think is also similar to what you're talking about, where it's like you want to be agile, you want to be okay with like things changing and adapting because sometimes they end up being better. Redefining success of, again, being willing to accept, like, okay, what is success really mean to me, not the expectation that other people have said success looks like or something like that,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah, and I think with not just like in an overall career trajectory, kind of all of those things relate, like embrace the possibility of like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen with this, I'm getting transferred or I'm getting moved into this other position and like that's not what I thought was going to happen or that's not necessarily what I wanted, but saying like, well, but what do I want? Like we're going to give it a try, see how it goes. There's other options, or like in the meantime, I'll remember what I'm actually after, which is, maybe this is a chance for me to branch into this other thing or have more time in this. So,
Yeah.
but also in the way that we work, I think those three things can also help. In particular, I think reframing success. I think we often like in meetings will kind of be kind of single-minded. Like the goal of a meeting is to kind of answer a question and then end the meeting. Especially virtual meetings, I find like the goal is to be done, right?
Yeah.
And it and it's really not very playful. Even with my team, we try to meet in person, but we mostly meet virtually. And I find myself, I have to say like, all right, let's just like, yeah, we answered that question, but can we go back and just linger for a minute? What if this? What about that? Like, what if we this instead? And we kind of have forgotten lingering can often mean kind of brainstorm, right? Or like throw some other ideas out. But like instead of kind of going directly in the linear path of the answer, like kind of hanging out for a second, hanging back and saying, wait, what else is there? Right?
Yeah.
What did we not consider? So I think our processes can be a lot more playful also in very, very simple ways.
It's interesting because I think of the workplace as very like it's all about efficiency, productivity. How can you use AI to move faster, 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 and like linger to your using your word, like you need to linger less. That seems to be the overall message. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, you don't see play as the opposite of like being productive. So explain kind of how that all works. How can you be playful and yet still productive?
Yeah, I think well, play in and of itself is productive if you realize that like feeling good, enjoying the process, and like connecting with yourself and others is a priority, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, what is productive, right? Is productive just like doing a thing that relates to earning money? Or is it productive to also, you know, be an entire human while you're doing it, right? So, and then I could also argue that it's productive because when you acknowledge that you're an entire human and feel good while you're doing it, you will be better at it, right? But I hesitate to ever kind of mechanize play in that way. But it is true that the more you're connected with yourself in the same way that eating well and exercising, like make our brains work better and make us feel better and make us like, more present in what we do. So I think, yeah, it's twofold. One is I'm trying to say let's think again, let's reframe what we consider productive. Um, and and also realize that, being well, being connected is going to help us be, more efficient if efficiency is what you're after.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I think people have figured this out, especially during COVID, where it was like wellness at work or like, being well is not just about like, okay, you don't have a temperature or fever today, so you're well enough to do your job. It's like, oh, there's actually like a lot more to it than just like, to your point, sleeping,
yeah.
eating, having a second to linger and use your brain on a task that isn't like step, 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 step. I think of that stuff is really like sucking the life out of the creativity and sort of I don't know, natural problem solving skills that maybe people have too. I'm I'm
Yeah, and there
curious.
is,
Oh,
oh,
mhm.
sorry, I was just going to say there's quite a bit of science behind this too. There have been a number of studies both in with college age students in psychology departments of a number of different universities, as well as studies that were done with rats that were like studying the way that brains form differently when there is play versus when there isn't play. So in the 60s, a neuroscientist named Marion Diamond showed how that play shapes our brains. And so she conducted a series of studies with rats, and one group of rats was raised in cages full of toys, mazes, and kind of social opportunities. So the rats were put together, and the second group was raised individually, and they had no toys and no mazes and no playmates. Uh, and they found that the structural and the chemical differences in the brains of the rats in the play environments were smarter. Their brains were larger and more complex, and and uh, they yeah, again, when they were given kind of other problem solving, like for example, complicated ways of accessing food. The rats who had played were able to access the food in ways that the other rats just like couldn't and also gave up. Like basically there was almost like this will to live that they found, and they were trying to like quantify, of course, like scientific studies with rats like this, the kind of the philosophical concepts like will to live are kind of tricky to get around. But she said ultimately like that was what they were seeing was the rats who hadn't played would just kind of give up. Like they weren't driven to survive in the
Hmm.
same way that the other rats were.
Well, I think of it
And then
as like
also,
they were smart enough to be like, I can figure this out. I'm gonna keep doing this until I figure this out, you know? Like I
well,
think of that for
and
humans too.
because yeah, and because they were, I mean, I think of it as like because they were more fulfilled, they were happier because they played, then they wanted to keep going, right?
Hmm.
And I think this is particularly relevant now because I mean, we think of play. I think people often think of play as like, oh, you do that when things are good, or like, oh, play is a nice to have, not a need to
Or
have.
when you
But in
retire.
Right, or when we retire. But in fact, like play is what keeps us going, right? When things are really bad, like that is when we actually need play, right? In order to reconnect with why we want to keep going through something that's hard.
Hmm.
And so I think that, and then of course with problem solving, it's similar. And there was another study that was done with psychology students where so they were, 18 through 22-year olds. And one group was given a really simple, like Rubik's Cube style puzzle and music. So they were put in a room, they had these little simple hand games and music, and they were in that room for 15 minutes playing with the games, listening to the music, and then they were given a test, like a problem to solve. And then another group of students were just put in a room, silent, no games, and given this exact same problem. And the scores of the students who had played for 15 minutes first were 63% higher
Wow.
across the board. And these were all, a large group of students who were at the same level in the same class. And so it was really clear, like if just being in a playful mindset, right? Because they had played, because they'd been around music, they went into solving a problem really differently than the students who had been sitting just, silently and still.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel like, if I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, I get the argument for play. But if I'm a leader and I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, what does it look like to practice this, or model playfulness at
Mhm.
work without it feeling like forced or cheesy or mandatory fun? I
Right.
feel like, work tries to do this sometimes with like bad icebreakers or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think people probably even can agree that it feels good to sort of like use your brain not on a screen to do something kind of playful. You hear the advice of like go for a walk if you need to like clear your mind. So I'm not saying a walk is play, but I'm just saying like as a leader, what are some ways that they can model playfulness at work?
Yeah. One thing is just a shift in kind of routine or a shift in habits. So say that you always have a meeting in the same structure in the same conference room. Moving into a new space or moving the chairs around, maybe, you move all the tables and everybody sits on the floor. At least if, those who can. But just changing the environment and people's postures will make a huge difference. I think because of kind of muscle memory and habit, right? A lot of times routine is not super helpful if you're trying to kind of come up with novel ideas or have a new approach. Um, and the other thing is I like and this is kind of I borrowed from improv to some extent when I was doing critiques as a design professor. So in a critique environment, um, a, uh, I would use things like what if questions. So I would say, all right, so as we discuss this work, we're only going to use, or as we like try to brainstorm around this idea, we're only going to, every sentence has to start with what if, or well, why not do this, or what if this, right? And so there's generative language. So a leader might say, okay, in this meeting, let's every sentence starts with what if. And what that does is first of all, it poses a kind of a possibility or a question to the group. So instead of people being in a mindset where they're pitching and then have to sell an idea that they're not sure about, right? Because the idea of the thing, point of a brainstorm is to there have to be bad ideas.
Right.
And if there's not room for bad ideas, then people aren't going to feel comfortable or free, right? Um, and there has to be trust. You have to trust that you can have a bad idea and not be, and not be like shot down or, that you're still going to be taken seriously. And they're in order to find new ideas, you have to, be somewhat comfortable with all of them aren't going to be stellar.
Right.
So with these kind of generative language, and it also kind of then it makes people, people get kind of tripped up and they all have to step out of their comfort zone of the way that they might normally pitch an idea or kind of defend an idea. So it makes there's kind of a teamwork that happens because one person poses a question and then everybody sets out to kind of, yeah, what if that? Well, maybe this, maybe this, maybe this, right? So people are invested in the idea as a team, which is always more playful than kind of one person pitching and then defending, and everybody else steps into a role of like, that's not good because of X, right? So
Hmm.
leaders can kind of give meetings like a like kind of toys. You can think of these prompts as toys or tools, um, and they'll change the way that the conversation happens.
Yeah.
Uh, so those are a couple of things, just kind of that would shift it up and take the meeting into a new place and probably stir up some new behaviors and ideas.
Yeah, meetings are a good place to start for sure. What about, you talk about free play, which is, activities that's voluntarily or voluntary, self-directed, and something that you are personally motivated by. What forms of free play can adults take that's different from things like joining a sports team or playing board games? Because those are the ones I immediately think of, and I'm sure you have a broader view than that.
Yeah, and I think so I'm all for like I when adults like kind of go back to something that, maybe you loved soccer when you were 14, but you didn't make the team, so you stopped playing, right? Or you like
Yeah.
loved the piano, but who's going to be a professional pianist other than like one in 10,000 people. So you stopped doing that, or like your parents prioritized your grades instead of, you got a tutor. So I think as we come up in childhood, we stop doing the things we love, not because they stop fulfilling us, but because we're not good at them, right? So something shifts from do what you're interested and curious about to like success gets framed as good or kind of innate skill or
Hmm.
talent. And so I think going back to things that we loved and being willing to do them because we love them instead of because we're, great at them is kind of a vulnerable thing to do. And I applaud adults who do that, or like going back to the ceramic studio and loving doing it. And it doesn't matter if all of your pots are crooked and your glaze is sloppy. Like it's fun and you loved doing it. So that's why you're doing it, right? So again, that's kind of like I applaud all of the play that adults go back to because playing in that way as an adult is pretty vulnerable, since we're kind of attached to success in certain ways. So that's one thing. But so with sports and the kind of organized play, I wouldn't consider those, for the most part, they're not free play, because they have the kind of extrinsic motivation of, get a goal. There's structure and instructions and teams, and you're kind of playing it, but you're not generating it, right? So in free play, because it's kind of puts you in touch with like what you want to be doing or what you're figuring out as you go. You're generating the play yourself. So, things like what I described, where if you're walking along, if you're taking a hike and it's flooded out, so you wind up kind of dilly-dallying and playing with the brook instead, or like poking around with some moss, like that would be the free play where like the the known outcome of the hike shifts to, I don't know where this is going and I'm gonna follow my nose, right? So
Yeah.
that's when it kind of shifts into free play, or when like you're having a soccer game with your friends and the ball deflates and half of the people leave. So all of a sudden you have an odd number of people and the ball is weird and you're like, well, what if we use our elbows instead, right? That would be where like it would shift into free play because you're kind of having to make it up as you go.
Hmm.
Free play is particularly, I think, critical for adults because so much of our lives are structured. And because in the sort of flow that happens when we're immersed in something that is kind of intuitively driven, um, that's when we really kind of connect with ourselves and enter a state of flow that can be so kind of healing and important both to our creativity but also to our well-being. And that's something that does relate to our play as children, right? As children, and D.W. Winnicott talks about this a lot. He was an early childhood psychologist who really did a lot of research into how play is related to creativity. And a lot of it had to do with trust and feeling safe, but also how much that type of play connects us to our creative selves and then can be enormously generative from there. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
so
love
this is just to say, sorry, your question was, I took the long route. Your question was like, how can adults, like, or what are some examples, I think was what you had asked. So like I said, say that you're working from home and you have a bunch of emails to answer, but you're just like slogging through, it's slow and you're feeling like, I don't know. I would say, let yourself get up and go rearrange the living room or play with your rock collection on your shelf, or like maybe you have figurines, or like rearrange a shelf, like take apart a lamp that's kind of broken, like let yourself kind of like dilly-dally. um and I think that that is free play. Like tinkering, I think of as free play because you're just like you're letting yourself do what you feel like doing and seeing where it goes. And you know, rearranging a shelf actually, I think, relates to feeling some sense of control,
yeah.
right? And often, one thing that I think a lot of us are struggling with right now is like feeling like, like the world is a little bit chaotic. I don't feel like maybe I have much control. Like I fear like everything about the way the news is presented to us is kind of meant to make us feel panic, right? So I'm finding myself personally doing a lot of play that's about like arranging and like sorting and organizing and like taking something that I can touch and control and like feeling like it's in order and it's controlled, right? So I think like that, thinking of that as play and letting yourself do it might actually help you then sit back down and be able to get through those emails that, and then you'll realize like, oh yeah, I like talking to people. Like
Yeah.
let's make this, I'm going to make this email more playful because I actually like this person. And like, instead of just getting through this and like, being efficient, like I'm going to, let it be a little bit chatty.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have loved this conversation. I totally see the benefits of play, and I'm already kind of recognizing areas where I can incorporate more play. I mean, I watch my kids do it a lot, and sometimes they'll even ask me to come play with them, and I'm like, oh, but I'm in the middle of this thing and I want to finish this thing. And it's like maybe being like, no, go play with them and be in that world. It would be also really good for me. So there's just like a
Yeah.
lot
I
of things
mean,
coming to mind.
one thing that's great, just briefly, one thing that's wonderful about playing with kids is that they don't, like, in terms of releasing judgment, when you're playing, and I like parallel play so that I can have my own play next to kids. Sometimes if I'm trying to play with the kid, like, it's not that much fun for me because we're in different places and they just want me to play out their play. And
Yeah,
I'm
they're
like, but I want to
dictators.
play, right? Yeah, yeah, they become dictators, play dictators.
Yeah.
So I'll do things like, we both have our own drawing. So I get to do my own drawing while they're doing a drawing. The thing that's so wonderful about children is that they aren't going to judge you. They'll judge you if you don't play, right? So I think you become aware of, in terms of releasing judgment, it's your own judgment. So it's a really great exercise in releasing your own judgment about yourself and letting yourself play. And so parallel playing with kids, I highly recommend it because like if you can get beyond that you're the one that's judging yourself, like that'll be really good practice when you then go and be around other adults and
Yeah.
maybe you want to make that social contract out loud with them and say like, hey, I want to be more playful in general. Like, do you promise not to judge me? And your friends will probably say like, what are you talking about? Of course I won't judge you. And then, so you can kind of go from there.
Amazing. Those are very good ideas to get started. Cass, tell everyone where they can learn more about you, follow your work. We obviously talked about your book a little bit, but mention your book and where they can get it.
Yeah, Playful is available anywhere that you buy books, online or at your independent bookstore. And my website is casholman.com with one S, CASHOLMAN. And if you're interested in any of the toys that I've designed, rigamajig.com. Rigamajig is our kind of biggest product. rigamajig.com. And it's sold both to schools, so we have a very large school set, and then we have some home sets as well.
Amazing. Okay, we'll put all of that in the show notes. Thank you so
Cool,
much for
thank
sharing
you.
today.